All right. Good morning, everyone. Quick introductions. My name is Jarek Wilkiewicz. I'm a developer advocate with YouTube. And here with me is Muir. He's a technical director from Activision. And we also have Cliff Samaniego and Kenji Arai from YouTube, who will be joining us for Q&A later in this presentation. So the agenda for today, we just went through the introductions. We'll talk a little bit about why would one want to integrate a game title with YouTube, and then what is the process of integration, so how do you actually get that done, and discuss the one use case in more detail, namely Call of Duty Black Ops. So for those of you that are gamers, this game needs no introduction, and for those of you that aren't, let me just say that it was the biggest game of 2010, and they made an incredible amount of money on that game. Okay. What I would like to start with is a little quiz to kind of wake you up and see how much you know about YouTube. I'm sure all of you guys are users, but I always like to test the knowledge of my audience. So question number one is, it should be pretty easy. How many views do we get per day on YouTube? Any guesses? 2, 3, 10 million? 1 million? 200 million? A billion-ish? OK, so actually, it's over 2 billion. And this is data from last year. Next question. So out of the 2 billion, how many are mobile? So consumed views on mobile devices. What do you guys think? 25%, 30%? 10%? Yeah, it's actually over 200 million. So it's over 10%. This number is also growing pretty fast. The last question, how much video is uploaded each and every minute to YouTube? How many hours? 20 hours, OK. Do I have 24 or 26? It's actually over 35 hours, which brings us to this presentation, because we'll be talking about uploading video to YouTube from a game. So why would anybody want to integrate with YouTube? First of all, the site is very international. We have hundreds of millions of users, and over 70% of traffic comes from outside of the United States. So if you want to target global audience, putting content up on YouTube is a good way to do this. Gaming is one of our top verticals, and we find that gamers are very engaged. So they create, share, discover new content, and socialize on YouTube. And we like that, because that really helps drive community engagement around the content that you put up on YouTube. And as Doug was going to talk about a little later in the presentation, YouTube gives you a mechanism to promote your title, and you can monetize some of that content as well, and thus grow your community, grow the excitement around your title. So we talked a little bit about why to go through this process of YouTube integration. And since we are developers here, let's talk a little bit about the APIs and how does one actually do this. So first of all, to upload a video to YouTube, there's 3 steps that one has to go through. First, the video needs to be encoded, and there are various encoding technologies available. So I know the 2 of them here that are quite popular, H.264 and WebM VP8. Once the video is encoded, we provide data APIs that can be used to actually push the video over to YouTube programmatically. So again, this is not going to youtube.com and uploading this manually. All we talk about here are the APIs. And then finally, we have set of player APIs. So if you would like to build, say, a video portal around the content that you have uploaded, you can use the player APIs to customize the playback experience. And I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these in the following slides. So starting with encoding, some platforms have H.264 encoding built in. In the case of platforms that don't, for example, on the Xbox, there was no encoder available during the integration process for Black Ops. We have WebM, which is an open source project. It is really designed for web video. So it provides pretty efficient compression and streaming capability, so you can achieve pretty high quality streaming at relatively low bandwidth. So as I showed here, 360p at 280 kbps, or 720p at 1.5 megabit. The technology performs quite well on platforms that don't have hardware offloading. And some platforms do have it, but they don't necessarily expose it through the APIs. Mobile is one case. And it's open source, so you can just fetch it from WebM project and try it out. And typically, video file consists of encoded video with VP8 and audio also encoded. And I wanted to mention Algum, which is also an open source codec that you can use to kind of combine the two and create a video ready for upload. So we created a video, rendered frames, compressed it, encoded it, and now we're ready to upload. So how do we do that? YouTube offers Google Data APIs. And for those of you that haven't worked with the data APIs, just a quick overview. They are based on REST, so they are very easy to use, really designed around HTTP protocols based on Atom. And we tried to follow a couple of RFC in the API design that kind of dictate how do you map an object model to a REST-based implementation. I mentioned the RFCs here. If you guys have trouble falling asleep, I recommend these. They're better than counting sheep. I actually like reading RFCs myself, so for me it's kind of fun to kind of check out how the design was actually driven by these standards. And we support XML-based encoding, so this is the representation of the actual data, as well as JSON, JSON-C, and RSS. And JSON, JSON-C are very relevant for JavaScript developers, but also in the mobile context, where you really care about the amount of information exchanged. JSON-C is a very efficient representation of the data, so that's something that you can request. When you make the REST request to our API, you can actually tell it what type of representation you would like to fetch. And the data that we expose is organized as a set of feeds. Each feed has a bunch of entries. So for example, video feed will have entries corresponding to individual videos. Subscription feed will have entries corresponding to individual subscriptions. And application integrate with the YouTube platform by basically interacting with these feeds. So entries can be deleted, created, queried, and so forth. And that's typically how an integration works. So let's look at an API invocation example. And since I mentioned that the protocol is based on REST, really all I need to do in order to invoke the YouTube API is issue an HTTP GET request to a URL, which I just did. And I basically asked it to show me all the top-rated videos on YouTube. And what you see here is an XML representation, which is the default Atom representation. I could have asked for JSON or JSON-C. Each entry corresponds to a video from this feed. And there's additional metadata information available about each of these entries. So I have a playback URL if I want to play the video back. There's description, tags, and so forth. So as you see, invoking the API is quite simple. You can do it directly over HTTP. We also provide GData libraries that abstract this process out. So if you don't want to do XML parsing or JSON parsing, you want higher level abstractions, we have open source libraries for that. So again, this is kind of zooming in on one of the result. What you see here is the feed as kind of enclosing entity, and then each one of these videos is represented as an entry. I'm highlighting here video ID as one of the important attributes of this video. And that's pretty much how one interacts with most of the GData APIs, Google Data APIs for YouTube. So the process of uploading the video really follows the same pattern. So how do we actually upload the video from a game? We offer several upload APIs, browser-based API, direct upload API, direct API, and direct resumable API. The browser-based approach doesn't really apply in our case here because we're talking about an integration from a game title and installed application. It is typically used for web applications where you would like to allow the user to upload a video to YouTube, but you want to take control over the entire experience. You don't want them to ever leave your site. You can use the browser-based approach. In this case, we're talking about integration directly from an application. And for that, we have two set of APIs, direct and direct resumable uploads. Really, the important difference between these two is direct resumable. It's very applicable to mobile context or situations where your connectivity can come and go. Because what direct resumable uploads allows you to do is if your connectivity goes down, you can actually pick up from where you left off. This way, you don't have to kind of restart the entire upload process. One thing that is important that I wanted to highlight is, we have to authenticate in order to upload a video on behalf of the user. Historically, client login was kind of the authentication method of choice, but recently the industry has really moved away from client login for many reasons, and instead has adopted an auth-SAP or auth2 device profile-based authorization model. And what that allows you to do is really to fetch a token that you can use in order to perform API operations on behalf of the user, but you never actually have to store the username and password. And it's nice not to have to do that because, you know, if for whatever reason you encounter any kind of security breach, the only thing that one could actually obtain is that token that is only valid for a specific subset of the data that the user has access to, and that token can very easily be revoked by the user. So I wanted to take a little time and talk about auth2 device profile, which is something that we have launched into beta very recently. The problem that auth2 device profile tries to solve is how do you actually provide a nice user experience on platforms that typically don't have a web browser. So what I'm trying to do is, you know, I would like to invoke a method or, you know, service that gives me access to a token which I can then use to perform API operations on behalf of the user, but I don't have a web browser on my device. So say I'm on a gaming console, you know, some kind of an embedded device, a TV and whatnot. So auth2 device profile attempts to solve this problem by really setting up a flow which at some point takes the user away from their couch, so they go and use a web browser in order to obtain the authentication token or authorize the device access to their data. So let's quickly walk through the flow. So what you see here is on the left-hand side, I have the device client. So that could be, you know, gaming console, TV, some kind of an embedded device without a browser. On the right-hand side, I have an authorization server, which is something that we have implemented, and other people in the industry are implementing that as well. And the first step of this sequence is that device client actually asks the authorization server to initiate the authorization sequence by supplying a client identifier. The client identifier is something that you can actually obtain through our API console. So when you actually register your application with Google, you can say that, you know, this is the application name, this is the image or thumbnail that you would like to show to the user when they attempt to perform authorization flow, and then the client identifier is something you get in exchange. This is what the device client must know in order to actually initiate the sequence. So really identifies the application as well. So once the client identifier is submitted to the authorization server, the authorization server returns a verification code. So you can think of it as a PIN code that the user can then use in order to authorize this device to access the user's data. And in addition to the verification code, user code is returned and the verification URI. The verification URI identifies the place on the net where the user has to go in order to complete the sequence. So what you see is the next step in the sequence is C, where the user will visit a site. Again, that's the site that is identified by the verification URI, and authorize access to the user's data, upon which the device will be able to retrieve the authorization token and proceed. So while step C is taking place, step E, the verification code reattempt is initiated by the device client. So it's basically a polling mechanism. The device will keep polling until the user authorizes the access. Then when the user actually authenticates, authorizes the access, the device will obtain the access token in step F, and from then on, that token can be used to actually perform API operations. So that's kind of the big difference between, you know, how things are typically done with client login, where somebody tries to type username and password in front of a TV that, you know, maybe doesn't have a keyboard, or, you know, they're on a gaming console where typically web browsers really not a part of their experience because it's not optimized for that. So this auth2 device profile tries to solve this problem. So let's look through a quick demo of how this thing works in practice. So I built a small application here that performs the authorization flow, and I'm using my favorite terminal emulator from the 80s called Cathode. So let's just start the sequence. So what you see here is this part would be executed by the embedded device, so TV or gaming console or whatever. The authorization server was contacted, and the token returned by it is shown and embedded in this URL. In practice, we will actually shorten the URL. So right now you see it's sandbox.google.com. It's a little long. We'll come up with something shorter. But the idea here is that the user will be presented with this code and the URL. Then they go to a website and actually identify it by the URL and type in the code. So let's try to do that. OK, so I followed that URL. I am presented with a prompt saying, device is requesting permission to connect with my account. Hit continue. I don't need to update. And then what I see is my application which I registered. So I mentioned earlier that you can provide a thumbnail that identifies the application, the title, and so on. So this application is asking for permission in order to access my YouTube account. I will grant access. OK. Now that I have done this, you have noticed that the polling has stopped. So my client application successfully obtained the authorization token. And then I will complete the upload. Yeah, so this process now performs a resumable upload of a video that I had on my local machine to YouTube. That upload was actually done into my account using the authorization token that this polling client obtained from the authorization server on my behalf. So you saw that in this embedded environment that I'm showing here, there was no web browser. So doing any sort of user experience based on web browser wouldn't have worked. But with auth to device profile, I can actually still implement that. OK, so we talked about video encoding. We have the video. We uploaded it to youtube.com using the API. Now let's talk a little bit about the player APIs and how can we customize playback behavior with our player APIs. So we offer 3 ways to customize the player and the playback behavior: URI parameter, JavaScript API, and an ActionScript API. So let's quickly walk through them. The simplest way to influence how the player works is player parameters. So in the top example, I have a parameter called full screen, fs equals 0. So by appending this parameter to my embed source, what will happen is the user will not have an option to actually pop up the video in full screen mode. So again, if you are designing an application which, for whatever reason, doesn't want to grant the user access to full screen playback because you always want them to see your web application, you can actually do that by appending a player parameter to the embed. So it's very simple. And on the bottom, I have an example of another parameter, autoplay. What that will do is when the user navigates to a page which includes this embed, the video embedded on the page will start playing right away. And one thing to note is the syntax of the bottom embed is something that we have introduced fairly recently. It's the iframe embed. It is kind of the default embed right now for YouTube videos. And we have a session about details of this implementation, how it works tomorrow. So we talked about the player parameters, but sometimes you actually want much finer control over what the playback experience is like. And for that, we actually have a JavaScript API and ActionScript API. So if you're a Flash developer, you can invoke methods on the player to start playback, stop playback, register for events, and so forth. And you can do the same thing with JavaScript. So here's an example where I'm actually creating an instance of a player, registering to a couple of events, and really what I'm trying to achieve is I want the video to start playing as soon as someone navigates to the page that executes this JavaScript, and then I want the playback to stop after 15 seconds. So let's try that. Maybe we crank up the volume. OK. So if you look through the code, really what I did here is I embedded this video. This is the video ID that I was showing you earlier in the presentation. I registered 2 events on ready, which is called, this event gets actually fired when player is ready to receive API invocations, and on state change. When player is ready, I trigger the video playback, and upon state change, when the playback starts, I set up a timer which will fire and trigger the video to stop after 15 seconds. So, I can very easily change that to, say, 5 seconds. And let's see. OK. Nothing interesting happens. But I think you get the point, that you can actually control the playback behavior through the player API. OK. So we talked about the APIs and platform integration and so forth. So now I would like to let Doug talk a little bit more about Black Ops. But first, a question. How many of you guys have actually played the game? For a month, but I see some folks that haven't. So why don't we look at the game trailer to give you a little better idea of what the game is all about, and then Doug will take you through the integration process that he went through with his team.
Okay. I'm Doug Muir. I'm a technical director at Activision, the studio that, or the company that published Call of Duty Black Ops. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the theater feature for Call of Duty Black Ops and how it integrates with YouTube. But first I want to talk about what we were trying to do. The primary thing we were trying to do with the theater functionality and allowing people to upload their videos to YouTube is we were trying to let people share their cool moments in the game. You do something neat, you get 5 kills in a row, you take out a helicopter with a tomahawk, you want to tell your buddies about it, you want to show them how that happened, how that worked. And so YouTube's a great way for us to let people share those cool moments with each other. In those terms, we were sort of looking at 2 things. We were looking to let our existing community connect with each other and share these cool moments, but we were also looking to expose Call of Duty to players who haven't gotten into the game yet. And we obviously wanted all the reporting and engagement and analysis that we could get, but we didn't want to have to build YouTube to get all this stuff. So the uploading process, the user experience for it is not the OAuth 2 device profile that Jarek just walked you through. A, that wasn't available when we did this integration, and B, as I'll talk about a little bit later, we came to the YouTube party a little late, and the game was pretty much baked at that point. We wouldn't have been able to integrate anything for the device profile integration anyway. But here's a short video sort of showing the process for uploading a clip from Call of Duty Black Ops to YouTube.
Hey everyone, it's Anaj, and right now I have a tutorial on how to get your Black Ops clips onto your YouTube account and onto your computer. And I know some people already know how to do this, but if you don't, I hope this video is going to be helpful. The only things that you need are an Xbox 360 or PS3, the game itself, an internet connection, and a YouTube account. And the greatest thing about this method is that it requires no capture card cables, wires, or editing software. And most importantly, This process is absolutely free. I'm going to go step by step, starting with the things you need to do on the internet, and then move on to the things you need to do with your Xbox or PS3. The first step is to go to callofduty.com and register an account there. And once you do that, go to callofduty.com/theater and link your gamer tag, which will require you using your Windows Live ID. Now go back to callofduty.com/theater, and on that page, click to link your YouTube account, and then click to allow access to your YouTube account. If you don't allow access, this whole process will not work. Now switch over to your Xbox 360 or PS3 and go into multiplayer and then into theater. Select the gameplay that you want, and while you are watching that game, find a segment you want to capture and select record.
Dog waiting for your mark. Dogs incoming. Losing Alpha. Friendly RCXD deployed.
When you have reached the end of the clip segment that you want to capture, hit record again. A very important note here, your clip cannot be longer than 30 seconds or it will not be uploaded. Next, you have to name the clip, save it, and upload it to a slot on your file share. Now get out of viewing the full game, and then take your clip from your file share and click Select for Playback. After that, you'll notice that the Render Clip option is now available, so click on that, and then the clip will be opened and will run through once. After, you will see a loading screen for the clip, which means it's being uploaded and rendered to the internet. After a couple of hours, your clip should be uploaded to your YouTube account and to your file share on callofduty.com/theater. This process does take some time, so don't expect your clip to be there as soon as the rendering has finished. So in other words, try to be as patient as possible.
So that's the flow, and you can see it sort of uses the normal web-based OAuth flow, and we'll talk a little bit about the details a little bit later. But how did we end up here? Where we started actually was we weren't thinking YouTube at all. We were thinking, okay, we have this cool feature. We can let people share their clips in the game, and you saw a little bit of that. We have the file share in the game, and people can download the clips and look at it from there. But we wanted to let people, share outside of our world of callofduty.com. So our first plan was actually we were going to put the clips available on callofduty.com, so you could go to callofduty.com, find your clip, download it, and then do whatever you wanted with it. Upload it to YouTube, send it to your grandma, whatever. But that's really kind of a horrible user experience. So the next sort of evolution of our thinking was we would turn callofduty.com into a video streaming site. We would serve the videos. We would have to do some transcoding, especially on the Xbox videos. Again, sort of due to the lateness with which we came to YouTube, we were not using WebM when the game launched. We're using Motion JPEG on the Xbox actually, because that was the quickest free codec for us to integrate with the game. And as we were working through this idea of streaming the videos from callofduty.com, we started asking ourselves, how much video are we talking about here? Call of Duty is a pretty big game. We expected Black Ops to do very well. And in fact, Black Ops has sold north of 20 million units so far. And as we started thinking about the size of the community and how much video we might be taking on here, we realized this is not Activision's core competency. Let's find somebody who does this pretty well. And that's when we thought of YouTube. Again, because we came to YouTube so late, I think we first started talking to them about doing this integration sometime in September for a game that was launching in November. We really had no way of doing any sort of account linking in-game. And because of that, because we couldn't link your account in-game, we wanted to have a good user experience for users who haven't linked their account. We didn't want you to go to theater and your first time trying to render a movie have to tell you, sorry, you don't have your YouTube account linked, you can't upload. We wanted something to happen even for users who hadn't yet linked their YouTube accounts, or who didn't want a YouTube account for whatever reason. They just wanted to share their video and not bother with the YouTube account. And after spending some time talking to YouTube, we came up with these per-platform Call of Duty channels, sort of catch-all accounts for people who haven't linked their accounts. And we upload the videos to those channels on behalf of these sort of role users, these fictional users. And that actually worked pretty well. So this is how the flow works. You build your clip on your Xbox, your PS3, you upload it. It actually goes to Demonware, which is the Activision studio that handles all of the multiplayer backends for all Activision titles. They handle matchmaking, they handle stats, backends, everything. And we go to Demonware, A, because we did this very late and we were already talking to Demonware, but B, some of the first parties have some policy rules about talking to just anybody out on the internet. So to work around those policy issues, the easiest thing to do was to just send it to Demonware first, which actually turned out to be very convenient in terms of account linking, because in the user flow that we saw a little while ago for linking your YouTube account, that token that we get back, the OAuth token, is actually stored at Demonware, and it's associated with your console identity. So when the video hits Demonware, they look up for the user that you're playing as, do they have an OAuth token for you? And if so, they upload that video to YouTube under your account for you. If not, then they go to one of these shared accounts, which get a lot of videos, and all the videos eventually end up at YouTube, and if you have linked your account, it ends up in the right place. And from there, you can watch the videos directly on YouTube, or you can go to callofduty.com/theater and find your videos there and watch them there if that's what you like to do. So the benefits of integrating for us, the big one was actually the ROI, and it's not so much that we made a ton of money from the YouTube views, is that we saved so much money by not having to build it ourselves. So rather than having to spend all the money to engineer a solution for the transcoding and streaming and build out the serving infrastructure for handling what we expected was going to be sort of a very long tail distribution of views, we were able to push all that work off on YouTube and have them pay us a little bit, which was a huge net win. In terms of user engagement, it's been working very well. Since the game launched on November 9th, we've had over 3.6 million uploads of videos to people's own YouTube channels and the shared YouTube channels. Nearly 70 million total views, and it's something that this is a true community-based marketing opportunity, for lack of a better word. We get PR, we get community buzz, we get people sharing their videos talking about the game. You go to YouTube and you search for Call of Duty Black Ops. There's a ton of videos, basically advertising our game. It's fantastic. Here are some of the key insights from the views and the uploads. I'm not going to read it. Some of the interesting ones are the male-female breakdown is just about what you might expect for a game like Call of Duty. Most of the traffic is actually coming from YouTube. The vast majority of the traffic is coming from YouTube, either people going to the Call of Duty channel pages or just searching for Call of Duty and finding the videos that way. In terms of player behavior, the thing that was interesting to us was, for a feature that, as you saw from the video outlining how you upload videos, for a feature that's kind of buried in the UI, we've had 580,000 plus players upload videos, and most of them actually have uploaded more than one. So it's not something where most players are going in and uploading one video and then giving up on the feature. We've had over 80,000 players have uploaded more than 10 videos each, and we've got one user who, as of late April, he'd uploaded over 500 videos. So that guy's working at a clip of about 3 a day, which we think is great. I mean, it sort of validates our whole thinking in terms of the feature. We expected that there would be sort of that creative core who would really get into the feature and produce a lot of videos, but we also wanted to build something that the more casual user would use, and we think that the usage stats are sort of bearing that out. In terms of views, this slide just blows me away. Well over 90% of the videos have had less than 100 views since November 15th, which when you think of the average age of the videos, that's less than 1 view per day. There's no way that we would have been in a position to handle that number of views building out our infrastructure ourselves. Akamai or any other CDN would not have helped with 90% of the views that we would have had to serve. So having YouTube and their scale and their serving capability was a huge win for us. I mean, the number of views with over 100,000, the number of videos with over 100,000 views is 36. I mean, it's the distribution is just frightening for anybody who would be trying to build a system like this themselves. In terms of what went right, I mean, like I said, we started this in September for a game that was shipping in November, and this was ready to go on November 9th when Call of Duty Black Ops hit store shelves. It was actually, I mean, the way I think about it, it was actually ready on November 8th when the game started launching in Australia. So that, I mean, that was a huge win for us. The technical support that we got from YouTube was fantastic. Being able to, the API docs and the public forums answered most of our questions. The developer support was fantastic when it didn't. And really, once we launched, except for one issue where we didn't know to watch the YouTube maintenance notifications, so there was one window when YouTube went into a read-only mode and we didn't know about it. And so we started panicking because our writes were failing, our uploads were failing. Except for that, we haven't had any issues since this went live in November. After 3.6 million uploads. In terms of what we could have done better, looking back, things could have gone a lot more smoothly had we engaged YouTube much earlier in the process. Had we done that, we might have been able to figure out something a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more user-friendly in terms of linking your YouTube accounts. And the fact that we didn't have a decent codec on Xbox kind of hurt things. Well, not kind of. It did hurt things. The motion JPEG encodings were so large, and because they do have to go through Demonware, we just couldn't allow clips longer than 30 seconds. And because of platform parity, we couldn't allow it even on platforms that did have better encoders. We've since added WebM encoding to one of the recent title updates for Call of Duty Black Ops, so we will be looking at relaxing that 30-second limit. That's absolutely not a YouTube limitation. They've been asking us for longer videos since the feature became available. That's something we need to work through on our side. What we learned after we launched was we really should have had somebody ready to engage the community on day one. Because we didn't have a lot of time to really put this together and build a proper UI around it, we had a lot of user confusion about uploads. We had users posting comments on the YouTube channel about, hey, you stole my video, that's my video. They didn't understand that when they uploaded the video without having a linked account, it was going to go to this shared account that wasn't theirs. We could have really done a much better job of engaging the community and educating the community early. It took us probably 2 or 3 weeks to get branding up on the channels, which probably also hurt the messaging on that. You go to this YouTube channel that has all these videos, some of which are yours, and it looks like just anybody else's YouTube channel. It doesn't look like an official Call of Duty channel. I think that added to the confusion as well. And really, until we did a similar presentation at GDC and this, we haven't done a whole lot of PR on the feature. It's kind of buried in the UI. We didn't really talk about it much with the gaming press. So, we really could have done a much better job of talking about the feature and really letting people know how cool it is that they can go into Call of Duty Black Ops and make these videos. And now we're going to see some samples that these are straight out of the game, straight to YouTube, using the exact mechanisms we've talked about before. I think the first one is an Xbox video, and I believe the second one is a PS3 video. And this is a Tomahawk killing a helicopter. I've been told to remind everybody that feedback goes to the URL right there. The QR code is also a link to the feedback link, or you can use the hashtags to give us feedback that way. And I believe we're ready for questions now. Cliff and Kenji, do you guys want to come on up? Cliff's coming. Kenji's too cool for it. Are there any questions?
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm an Android game developer, actually. Do you have any advice on how one might implement this sort of thing with Android games, letting users record their video and share it?
So the question was for an Android developer how to implement a similar feature for Android. Well, the first thing I'll say is the whole bit about capturing the gameplay and rendering it out kind of falls on you. I mean that's going to be different for each game. I don't know what your rendering engine is. Beyond that, though, the upload and the linking with YouTube actually could probably be pretty smooth on Android because you do have a browser and even embedded web views that you could use to do the linking right inside your game, so that any user can immediately, the first time, upload straight to his YouTube account and have it work that way. And if that's an option to you, I would definitely recommend that because it worked and it was fantastic that we were able to let people upload their videos without having to have a YouTube account, but it did cause all kinds of confusion for who is this guy who's got all these videos and why is he taking them from me? So if you can get people to upload straight to their own YouTube account right from the beginning, that's definitely what I would recommend.
Wow, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to add that on Android you have Account Manager, so you can actually obtain the authorization tokens much easier than what we have demonstrated. And I see two approaches that people have been trying. There's already some titles that have this functionality. One that I kind of like is this little application called Talking Tom by a company called Outfit7. My daughter really likes to play with it. It's basically a cat. You can talk to it and it talks back to you. It actually has a YouTube upload capability, so you can hit a camera button and they do the rendering and coding. They push it up to YouTube. So we get a fair amount of Talking Tom videos. And then others have been thinking about, can you actually do the rendering and encoding in the cloud? So ship the states over to the cloud and do the encoding there. You could then be very creative. You could do it in higher resolution. You could do it in 3D. I mean, it opens up a whole range of possibilities.
Oh, yeah, and the stream gameplay events could be very small.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Vinay. I have a question. Do you have custom search features on the website for the?
So the question is, do we have custom search features on the website? YouTube doesn't have any custom search features. We do add some keywords to the videos when we upload them. Most of the meta information that we tag is actually with developer tags, and we do have plans for using the developer tags that we attach when we upload the video. But there's nothing that you can see using that yet. But there definitely is a way to do that, and all of the videos that have been uploaded have been annotated with developer tags that we are planning on using at some point in the future.
I have two questions. One is, can you bypass or work around the browser verification? So if you're playing, let's say on the PS3, is there a way that you don't have to force the player out of the game to go and authenticate its account? And the second question is there any way you can stream from YouTube to the game? So again, on the console, like let's say PS3, is there a way you can take a stream and just play it?
PS3 and Jarek might probably, sorry, the question was, is there a way to bypass the going to the browser and linking the account? And also, is there a way to stream back to the game console? And Jarek might be able to talk a little bit more about this. But on the PS3, actually, they do have native platform APIs for uploading to YouTube and linking your account in the cross-media bar. So ahead of time or even in-game. Xbox is really the one where that's not available. And because we are a cross-platform game and trying to present the same experience across all the platforms we support, we kind of work with the lowest common denominator. It's possible now that we've done the feature once that we would have a different implementation path for PS3 versus Xbox going forward, but again, because of how late this all came together, we just stuck with a common path for both. In terms of streaming back to the console, I believe it is possible, but I don't know if there's any convenient APIs for doing it.
Two quick notes. So back to PS3. So the firmware actually has the capability. The problem is it still uses client login for authorization and authentication, which is something that the entire industry is really moving away from. So that is still an open issue. And for YouTube accounts, you see more and more cases where client login will not be sufficient. For example, if you enabled two-factor authentication on your account, that may actually prevent client login access because the box doesn't implement that flow. And there's a number. We actually have a blog post about all the different cases that we know of today that client login can fail. And then on the streaming inside of the game, this is something that we've been thinking about, but probably we would need to know a little more about the context. So we're going to hang around after this. If you would like to talk to us a little more about what you have in mind, then we could definitely look into that.
Thank you.
I have another question. As I understand, the flow is from the game, the video is uploaded to your backend servers, and from the servers, it is uploaded to the YouTube. So the bottleneck really is how much upload your backend servers can handle rather than how much YouTube can handle.
Yes.
So is there a way that you can directly upload to YouTube?
Absolutely. On the PS3, that absolutely would have been an option. It's rendered on the it's rendered on the console for every platform, and the PS3 has Sony has no first-party limitations about talking to the internet, basically. Microsoft does have some first-party rules about who you're allowed to talk to from your game. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you have to go through the live service platform gateway, which ours lives at Demonware, so we sort of have to stream through them no matter what. And again, because of simplicity, we just decided to do it the same way on both platforms. But without that limitation, we absolutely would have been able to upload directly to YouTube. Now, the tricky bit in that case, though, would be knowing the OAuth tokens, because our consoles don't have them. Those are stored at Demonware. So if we were going to be uploading directly to YouTube from the console, we would have to have some mechanism, probably when you log into our backends, we would then have to, send the console your OAuth token so that the console could go directly there. So going through Demonware, did impose a bottleneck on us, but it also gave us a single point where we could store the OAuth tokens and deal with all the upload logic and work that way.
Sorry, if I may extend. The question was mainly in terms of the infrastructure that you need to have, right? So probably one of the reasons that you went with YouTube is that you don't have to have the whole lot of infrastructure, but still you have to have a scaled down version, or so. Was that?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, Call of Duty already has a fairly large backend infrastructure just because of the size of our community. I don't know how much I'm actually allowed to say at a public place like this, but suffice it to say that there are hundreds of thousands of Call of Duty matches going on every day. And so we already have a fairly large infrastructure for dealing with that. Okay. The video bandwidth is actually not a large part of what's going on. It's only a bottleneck because of all the other bandwidth, because of all the other traffic hitting our backends just as part of running the Call of Duty multiplayer service.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm not sure if I missed this, but is there a way, is there going to be a way for users to authenticate themselves to upload videos that's not client login and doesn't require a browser?
So the question is there a way to authenticate for uploading videos that's not client login that doesn't require a browser? And as far as I know, the answer to that right now is no.
My guess is in the future there will be, because ultimately that's probably what you would want.
Yeah, I mean, we would love it absolutely. But right now I don't believe there is a way to do it that doesn't involve a browser.
I think, you know, when it comes to kind of standards-based solutions that we've been tracking, I don't see anything. So like the all-to-device profile in beta is probably the closest we've gotten to something that takes you, you know, away from the device in a standards way. I mean, you could certainly think of a proprietary mechanism to achieve that. And, you know, we haven't been taking advantage like of people's smartphones, for example, for that. So there's many mechanisms that one could envision. But when it comes to kind of standards-based approaches, I don't see anything right now.
The good news is that with OAuth 2 device profile, you could do it all without leaving your couch if you have a smartphone or something like that. I mean, which will be an increasingly common use case.
Because I guess that's kind of one of the reasons why, despite its insecurity, people still use client login, because ultimately it does, from the user's perspective, it does make the flow a little bit more straightforward, right? But then, of course, there's an involved security.
Right.
Yeah, but less secure, right?
And the problem with something like client login, the potential problem would be you don't necessarily want to be storing those credentials on the console, so now you're asking the user to log in every time they want to upload. Whereas with the OAuth solution, we do that linking once, and then until the user revokes those tokens, we can use them to act on the user's behalf.
Yeah. One thing that I didn't cover in the flow is the auth has a way to refresh the token. So you don't actually have to go through the entire flow. There's a refresh token that can be stored on the device, and then when the access token expires or is close to expiration, you can actually do the dance again. And typically, the client login tokens, their life may not be as long. So then you have to renew it or refresh it. But in order to do that, you either have to prompt the user again or you keep the credentials. And, you know, storing the credentials is always, I mean, any developer that builds these types of applications tries to avoid it as, you know, as much as fire, because there's so many things that can go wrong with if you store the credentials. Yeah.
I had a question for you, Doug. You said that you guys were using a lot of the metadata in terms of adding developer tags, I guess, and looking forward to new ways to, I guess, engage those videos that users have uploaded. My question was, how much optimization did you guys do in terms of search terms and keywords that users might be looking for the videos as they were uploaded? So were you guys like thinking about how people are going to find these videos on YouTube, or was it just kind of like they name it whatever they named it, and then it goes up, and the Call of Duty community, I guess, creates the browsing structure for its own community to find those videos?
Right. So the question is, if I were to paraphrase, is how much optimization have we done on the keywords that we, you know, attach to the videos as we upload them, so to make it easier for users to find videos. And the answer to that, unfortunately, is almost none. You know, we upload your title that you attach in the game. We attach your gamer tag to that as well. The developer tags, which you know, we have some plans for, but we're not using yet, do contain a little bit more information, things like other users in the videos, the map, the game mode, things like that. But those are not visible to the YouTube channel. But yeah, in terms of that, and that's sort of another place where we probably should have been a little bit more ready in terms of engaging the community. We could do a whole lot on our backend when we upload to organize channels, organize playlists, and really curate our channel. And right now we're not doing, you know, really any of that. I don't know who has worked in the game industry before, but there's always something else that seems higher priority than those sorts of tasks. So hopefully we'll get to it.
Well, it seems like you guys are doing pretty good. So.
Yeah,
I would like to add one thing is, you know, even though, as Doug mentioned, there wasn't necessarily a lot of emphasis on optimization, if you go back to the slide that he was showing where most of the views were actually from YouTube, that means that users were able to find the content. And in fact, when we were looking through the data, it looked like a lot of the views were actually related videos. So when you watch a video on YouTube, at the end we show related videos. So we were able to still kind of figure out, you know, what is the content relevant to these uploads, and then keep them within, you know, this set of videos. So in the end, it worked out, even though it maybe wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do more to support it and more to sort of curate our YouTube channels, but it's, you know, we're fantastically happy with it so far.
All right, we have 2 more minutes, so if there are no more questions, thank you very much for coming and enjoy the rest of Google I/O.
Thank you.